All right, looks like I am live on Facebook and Instagram drawing, so I'm just setting everything up right now. And let's see here. I'll move some things around and get ready. All right. Let's see here. All right, let me make sure everything's good. Let's adjust my camera over here a bit. Back it up. All right. I don't know how far back out to put it so y'all can see, but there we go. All right. Well, thank you everyone that will be joining here shortly, and if you watch it later as well, thank you so much. And this is the first time I'm doing this, so I'm just trying to get everything like set up where it needs to be and all that stuff. So if you'll bear with me in just a minute. I've literally never done anything like this before. I've been online before, and there was a couple times where I did some drawing with some friends on Facebook, but never on my own drawing. So we'll see how this goes. So right now what I'm working on, this is a huge landscape. I started with pencil, but I'm switching over to charcoal now for various reasons, which I'll get into as I draw, I think. But this is a large, I call it a apocalyptic landscape. And reason for that, I'm very much inspired by the work of John Martin. I don't know if you've ever seen John Martin, but or his works, but he did a lot of like really big dramatic landscapes, and I've never tackled anything like this before, so figured I'd give it a shot. But I'm going to do it here in pencil and charcoal. So feel free to ask any questions or or just make comments or whatever, but I'm going to start drawing. And where I'm working right now is in the upper left hand corner. So this whole thing is about 6 foot by 6.5 foot by 3.5 foot. And and so like I said, this is the second largest. No, this is the largest drawing I've ever tried. I have another one that's in process. It's a little bit bigger than this one. So let me grab my pencil here. So let's see here. So I'm using a 4H pencil. That's my HB. I'm getting 4H. I'm using a 4H pencil up here in the corner. Because this is a really light area. Make sure y'all can see the drawing. Yeah. So get to work here. So this area that I'm drawing right now is just got some clouds coming in front of a sunset, and so yeah, this is the sun that's going to be peeking here behind these clouds. This is my main light source. So I'm going to make some of these clouds a little bit darker here around the edges, just to emphasize where the light is coming from. And so I'm using a 4H, and then I'm using one of these little blending stumps to soften up the pencil marks, give it a really nice feel. Let's see here. So I had to be real subtle in this area because this is the lightest area of the whole drawing, and then the rest of the drawing is going to be really kind of dark and a lot of destruction and that kind of stuff. So that's where I'll switch more to charcoal. But for right now, I'm just going to focus on these real light clouds. Just going to use this blender to create a lot of little subtle transitions and little details to indicate some clouds here covering, doing some coverage here. So yeah, if you're watching this live or if you watch this later, thanks for checking it out. I am currently in my studio at the Visual Arts Academy and studio in Louisville, Kentucky. And just spending a little bit of time doing some drawing here before tonight's session. We have a open studio session tonight with some figure drawing and some still life setup for people to come in and practice. So figured I'd come in and get a little bit of drawing done on this piece that I'm working on right now. All right, so there's really different techniques that you can use to get this blended really nicely. I mean, you could just use, you don't really have to use this blending stuff, but I kind of like its effects. Sometimes you can use your finger to really get some nice smudges in there. The thing I like about this blending stuff is that, especially if you've used it for a while, you start to get, it starts to give little, almost like blending marks, which can be a disadvantage if you want it nice and soft. But I like to use it to my advantage and add a little bit of some subtlety and variation in the shading. Just gives the clouds an added feeling of realism. So that's what I'm going with. Right now, I'm just kind of experimenting. I don't have a formal reference picture that I'm going off of. I'm just going to start putting in some clouds here in different locations, and just see what happens. It's kind of scary doing that because you could turn out great. You might end up doing something you don't really like, but it's okay. You just go back in and fix it and either erase it or cover it over or use it for some other purpose. So that's the beautiful thing about drawing and art, is that you're kind of in charge. You don't have to feel like it has to look exactly like a photograph. Unless that's what you're going for. Unless you're going for hyperrealism, but I'm not really going for hyperrealism. I have a few reference photos that I'll look at every once in a while just to make sure that what I'm doing, looks real, but I'm really just trying to, this is a kind of a fantastical landscape. So I'm not really wanting to reproduce a photograph. I'm more just trying to tell a story with this. So I want the clouds to look like clouds, but they don't have to look exactly like a picture that I have, or a photograph that I have. So feel free to leave questions or comments, and love to have a little discussion while we work on this drawing. All right. So there we go. Yeah, so I'm just trying to put in some very, very subtle tones. Some of these I might lift out with one of those putty erasers. Some of these I may darken up a little bit. but I really want it to be nice and light because this is the main light source of this whole drawing. The sun is going to kind of be hiding up in the corner off the drawing, but it's going to be shining through these clouds. So it's really a matter of, and this is true of the whole drawing, is you're just working layer upon layer upon layer of tones until you get it exactly how you want it. But this area here is going to be really subtle, and so this. So I'm going to reserve like blank white space probably for the upper corner, but there's also the tone of the sky that you have to take into consideration, and the shadow behind some of these clouds as well. So my goal here is to show a few layers of cloud, just kind of circle around this, built up into this corner, and then there's going to be some pretty strong light beams coming across, and they're going to go across the whole drawing plane down to the kind of the middle area off to the right. There's going to be some figures down there that are silhouetted and are catching some of the light from this sun area that's up here in this left-hand corner. And as I said before, this will be the lightest part of the drawing. The rest of the drawing is going to be pretty dark in tone. So that also means that as I draw one area, I'll go back and adjust other areas. So I may work on this for a little bit, and then I may shift down somewhere else, and then that'll help me know if I need to maybe darken up an area or lighten an area. And it's also interesting when you're this close to it and you're working an area over and over again, sometimes you no longer see what you're drawing. And so you got to step back and step away from the picture, take another look, make some adjustments, all that. So that's the one thing Seth and I were talking about, how intimidating it can be to get on like a Facebook Live or Instagram Live and draw in front of people, because you're always afraid of like making mistakes and that kind of thing. But the reality is, like, you are going to make a mistake. So, you just go with it, and whether someone's looking at it or not, there's always going to be mistakes. I think when you draw live, though, the difference is like people can see it as it happens, whereas when you're drawing and there's no one around, you can fix it before anyone comes and looks at it. But I think it's more real if you can see that process, right in front of your eyes, that, hey, no matter what skill level you're at, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get in there, and there's going to be things you don't like about what you're drawing. There's going to be some things you love, and you want to keep it. There's some things that you'll have to change. It happens to everyone. So I usually, I've told people this before, I very rarely post early drawings. Like, if I had a blank sheet of paper, that would make me the most nervous, because my beginning drawing is usually horrid. I make so many elementary mistakes that I have to go back and fix. But one thing Seth and I also talked about was that, every artist is different, and you can't compare yourself to other artists and their process, because they may sit down and draw something like immediately, whereas it may take me, 20 steps or 20 redraws, but I still get to the same end goal. That's great. So always have to be careful about comparing yourself to other people's process, because everyone's a bit different in how they're different in their experience level and their ability, their practice, how long they've been doing their skill level and all that kind of stuff. So, and we're all in process. So I'm not going to be the same artist I am in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, and neither will the person that I'm looking at and think, oh man, what they're doing is just absolutely amazing. Doesn't matter. They may have been drawn longer than you, but they are still in the process of growth too, and they were at the same place you were at. So I always have to remind myself of that, especially when I started drawing this. I was like, okay, well, I have no idea where I'm going with this. Might turn out badly, might turn out great. I don't know. So we're just gonna go for it. So. But yeah, I appreciate you guys checking in on the live stream. We always enjoy having people watch and interact and ask questions and all that. So thank you all very much for checking us out. This is definitely something we want to continue to do as we grow as an academy. And I think people really appreciate seeing this. So you can see our process and helps them learn as well. So I hope this is helpful. All right, so right now I am just thinking about this cloud here. I don't want to make it too dark, but I'm thinking, it's catching a pretty significant shadow because it's really kind of the closest to the sun, and so it's a really delicate balance. Like on one side, it's going to have some dark shadow because the sun is so strong, but at the same time, because the sun is so strong, you lose a lot of detail, and some of it fades and is hidden by the light. So it's really a mix of some areas that are going to be a bit darker, and then other areas that you're just going to lose because the light of the sun is so overpowering. So I'm just kind of adding in some areas of dark. And we'll see. I may add this area in, and then step away and be like, that was too much. I need to go back and erase it. Like I'm working on another drawing right now. I'm writing and drawing my third graphic novel, and I'm on page 3 right now. And I drew the floor, and the floor has this design, like floor tiles with a bit of design on it. And I got the floor tiles in. I used 2-point perspective on it. Everything looked great. And then I went in to go put some design on some of the tiles. And for whatever reason, the way I was doing the perspective, it just didn't line up right. So that the actual design on the tiles didn't work. So I literally had to erase like half my page, which was really frustrating. But that's just the nature of drawing. You get in there and you work at it, and then you change it and you move on. And that's how you learn. You try something you've never done before. Very rarely, if you do something you've never done before, it'll be right the first time. So do not be intimidated by trying something a little bit different. All right. So yeah, I'm just continuing to work this cloud. I'm using a 4H, which is a very hard lead, which means it's not leaving a lot of graphite on the surface. So you really you don't have to push hard, but you're just adding layers to it, which helps give it a little bit of darkness. So if you don't draw a lot, you don't know how the leads work. So most people know, you have a number 2 pencil. It's what we all use, or at least used to use before Chromebooks and laptops came into the picture. But we used to use a number 2 pencil, which is just your standard pencil. It's basically like an HB. That's kind of what that would be. So most people know what a number 2 pencil is. So that's kind of a mid-tone, HB. So you have H for hard leads and B for softer leads. And HB is kind of a mix of both. And when you get into harder leads like H's, like I'm using a 4H here, you can press as hard as you want. It's not going to get very dark at all. So what you do is you can increase your the grade of your pencil. So you can start with 4H and then go in with a 2H or an H, and then go in with the HB and then a 2B, 4B, and 6B, and onward. But right now, what I'm trying to do is just I want some areas that are a little bit dark, not too dark, and then other areas that just kind of fade away because that sun is shining through these clouds. So that's kind of what I'm doing right here. So. All right, and then I'm gonna be careful. I got lead on my finger. All right, so put some shadows in here because as the light is coming down here, this outer edge will probably get lost a little bit, but inside the cloud, there's going to be a bit of shadow. So we're gonna go in there. So I'm trying to create volume to these clouds. So sometimes when you're looking up at clouds, they may seem awfully flat, insignificant, but even though they're light and wispy and there's not much to them, they can be pretty intimidating and thick and I don't know what the word I'm trying to think of, voluminous, I guess you could say. So I'll put in some darker tones to indicate some shadow in here to give it that depth and heaviness. Because the other thing I'm thinking of too is like these clouds are going to be like light and nice, and they're going to transition into these like real dark, heavy storm clouds. So I do want to indicate some of that. It's almost like as a writer, not foreshortening. It's gosh, what's the word? Like you're indicating something beforehand. All of a sudden, my mind went blank on that. Not foretelling, but foreshadowing, maybe. Either way, that's kind of what you're doing visually. You're putting a little bit of depth in these clouds here to let the viewer know that as your eye goes across, it's going to get pretty serious. So. And the next thing I'm going to start thinking about as I'm drawing here is kind of the next layer of clouds. And I'll probably put some a bit up in the corner here. I kind of like the idea of them almost swirling a little bit, so I may do some of that as well. So let's see here. And like I said before, just going in with really, really light tones. Blend it a bit, give it a little bit of softness. I'll probably use a brush here in a bit, and that really softens up the edges. Let's see what this looks like here. And then you can also use your blending or putty eraser, and that lifts up a few little areas to give it highlights. So that's the other thing about clouds is that, in some areas, there's obviously a variation of thickness. So you're going to have some areas where the light is really going to catch. You get this like effervescence right in the middle of the cloud, right next to some areas that are pretty deep shadowed. So there really is a lot of variation in clouds that sometimes you can miss because we see them every day. Sometimes common things, we miss all the amazing detail out in nature because it just becomes so familiar to us. But that's the beautiful thing about art is that it forces you to slow down and pay attention to the things that you see around you. All right. All right, we're slowly coming along with some clouds. I'm gonna also trying to give some areas a little bit of definition. So if you look at closely at clouds, there'll be some little pockets of like, round, almost like bubble shaped lumps or whatever, and then there'll be other areas where they'll be wispy, sometimes even in the same cloud. So I'm gonna try and indicate some of that. Give it a little smudge there. Even in that last little mark that I just did, that might be too dark. But here in a minute, once I work it a little bit longer, I'll get up and kind of step back and review how my tones are working with the rest. There we go. Yeah, the other thing you're always taking into consideration too is, this is just the first kind of pass at this drawing. So Seth talks a lot about this when he was doing the painting, is, you don't want to hyperfixate on one area, get that all finished, and then just kind of move across. I do have a tendency to do that a little bit, but it is good to kind of just work on an area, work on another area, go back and forth, because it'll let your eye be fresh and make any kind of adjustments that you need to make here. So. Put a little bit of a dark area down in this corner. And I do want to indicate kind of a bottom to this cloud a little bit. But I'm liking this cloud. It's coming out all right. We'll see. It might be one of those things where I work on it and then I step away and I start thinking about it more. Then I'll come back and look at it with fresh eyes and then be like, what was I doing there? But it's okay. Just go back in and fix it. Make adjustments. I honestly have not drawn a ton of landscapes. Usually what I draw, I like drawing figures. I like figure drawing a ton, partly because I also like to draw comic books and superheroes and sci-fi and that kind of stuff, which involves a lot of drawing figures. That is what I was, when I went to school, that's what I was trained in, was illustration. But I do love fine art and realistic drawing and painting as well. I don't paint as much though. I should probably paint more, but I was thinking about it the other day because Seth usually gets on here and he'll do he's working on a painting right now. And now I'm getting on here and working on some drawing. At some point in the future, we should switch it up where now Seth does a lot of drawing. I mean, that was his major in college, was sequential art. So he does a ton of drawing. So don't get me wrong on that. But he does a lot more drawing than I do painting. But it would be, I think, a fun little exercise. Maybe even at the same time, we could do a two-person stream where he's drawing and I'm painting something. He'd give me a hard time about stuff I'm still learning that comes natural to him. So, all right. Let's see here. We'll work on some of these other clouds. this part here is a little flat, so I'm gonna go in and put a little bit of variation. Because like I was saying before, I want these clouds, I want them to have life. I want them to, you don't want them flatten out too much. Now, if they're far away, far in the distance, then yeah, you do want some flatness to them because of atmospheric perspective. But for these clouds right here, these ones are kind of in front a bit. So I do want them to have some shading, shadow variations. So, yeah, so I am just so very thankful for this opportunity to draw with you guys because this is the first time I've ever had like a real studio space. And so it's really cool to be able to come up here at the Visual Arts Academy and spend some time just drawing. And so I keep mentioning Seth, but if you don't know who Seth is, he is the co-founder and lead instructor here at the Academy. And he and I have talked a lot about wanting to get online and do live drawing and things like that. So we're finally getting to it, and we're both really excited about that opportunity. So it's really cool that I have a little space here that I can come up here, do some live drawing, come in here when I'm not teaching a class and work on some of my own work. And one of the things that Seth has talked about in his session is just about as instructors staying fresh with your own work and making sure that you're growing and as an artist and challenging yourself to do things that you don't normally do. There's a real temptation when you kind of get a handle on how to draw or paint is just to do the same thing over and over again, because you know it gets easier as you do it because you know what's involved with the drawing. But there is something to be said about challenging yourself to draw things that you've not drawn before, paint things that you've never tried before. And for me, doing a landscape at this size is quite challenging because it's not something I've done a whole lot of. So I've done landscapes before, but nothing this big. So, but now what I'm doing is just going in, putting in a bit of darker tones in these bigger clouds, while trying to remain a bit subtle with it, because clouds are nice and soft. Clouds are like gentle giants. They're these huge, massive forms. I don't know if you're like me, but whenever I fly in a plane, I'm always in awe of clouds. They strike a little bit of fear in me because they're so big. There's just that sense of like your own insignificance, I guess, or just can be super intimidating. I've seen videos where people parachute and they'll go through a cloud, which I think is illegal, but they'll go through a cloud, and it's so frightening to me to be in the middle of something so huge and vast and potentially dangerous because of all the things that can be in a cloud. But either way, those are things that it's good to think about, even though those are not visual elements. It helps your drawing because you're wanting to communicate the vastness of a cloud, and it's just the characteristics of what a cloud is. It's the same with anything, you know. That's the joy of being an artist, is that you're capturing not just the form of something, you're also wanting to capture. You're also wanting to communicate something about that object or that person or that animal or whatever it is that you're working on. So yeah, right now, once again, I'm using this little blending stump here. This is I've used this stump quite a bit, and I use it with some charcoal too. So it does leave little divots are not a good word because it's not leaving actual physical marks on the paper, but it is leaving little marks, almost like little pock marks, I guess you could say, which that can be bad, but I try to use it to my advantage because it gives what you're shading a little bit uneven variation. And there are very few things in nature that are smoothly shaded. There's all kinds of details that you don't think about, even in the smallest, most insignificant parts of nature. So if you just spend a little bit of time looking closely at things, you'll see all kinds of variation, whether it's color, whether it's texture, whether it's the way the shadow hits something. You think just a leaf. If you look closely at a leaf, it's got all kinds of variation and gradation all over its surface. And it's the same with a cloud. Very rarely do you see just a plain white puffy cloud. Clouds have all kinds of tones and variations and shapes and textures going on inside of them. So I try to use my irregular pencil marks and blending marks as a way to give the cloud some personality, I guess you could say. So feel free to leave any comments or questions. I'd love to chat while I'm drawing. Gives my mind a little bit of a break and gives my eye a rest as I look away too for a few minutes. But right now I'm just trying to add a little bit of depth to this. This is kind of a huge cloud. It's really, really dark off to the right, and then it just kind of gets lighter because the sun is kind of off the paper up in the upper left. But I'm carrying some of this darkness over a bit. And as I was saying before, even in the brightest part of the cloud, there's going to be some shading, some shadows. So right now I'm just adding in a lot of tones, and I'm going to take my putty eraser and lift some off. Oh, thank you, Amy. That is beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am looking forward to seeing how it'll look when it's finished. I can't take all the credit now. I might get through it and have to erase part of it and redraw it, but I appreciate what you're saying, and it's a huge compliment. I really thank you. It's very encouraging to hear that. Because like I said, this is not something I normally work on. I'm normally draw figures and comic books and that kind of stuff. But in the last year, I've really gotten into drawing a lot more realism and also drawing much larger. And so this is quite a project that I'm working on. So, but yeah, I appreciate the feedback, Amy. Thank you so much. All right. So yeah, so this part's a little bit monotonous just because you have to layer your tones, like, to get this a lot of like subtle transitions. So it takes a lot of like going in, putting in a tone, blending it, putting in some more tone, blending it, lifting some off. So yeah, so that this little part in the corner will take a bit more time than you would expect because it's just a small area. Whereas if you know it's really dark, you can put in these tones, then you can quickly transition into darker tones. But this whole area is very subtle, so just trying to be very gentle with the shading. Okay. Yeah. right, yeah, just continue putting in some tones here. Just trying to figure out which clouds I'm gonna give some a little bit more definition to, because it's a real balance between, it's kind of a controlled chaos, because clouds very rarely, none of them look exactly alike. They're like snowflakes. They all look slightly different. So that's actually an advantage, because you don't have to worry about a cloud looking a particular way. You can let the abstraction work to your advantage. So that's what I'm doing here. I just add some marks, add a little tone here and there, just kind of put my head back and see how it's going, see where I want to add. And I'm also thinking compositionally wise too. So in this corner, there's a real light area in here, and you want to break it up unevenly. You don't want like a line of clouds. Like, I'm kind of starting to do that, so I'm going to maybe pull some of these clouds out a bit. You don't want all the clouds to look exactly the same. It's really distracting. So you just, you just keep working at it, and eventually you'll get to something that you're happy with. So sometimes that takes longer than other times, that's for sure. There are times where you work on a drawing and you keep working on it, and you're just like about ready to give up. And then that next time you sit down to draw and something clicks and it just comes together. And yeah, it just reminds you of the power of perseverance. It's definitely one of the key components or key characteristics of being an artist is perseverance. It's very, very easy to talk about all the drawings that you're going to do, all the projects that you're going to work on. It's very different to actually do them and complete them. And that's the hardest part, so. Right, so just trying to see where these clouds are going. Kind of like, so this is an example of where just random marks can work into your advantage. I don't have a photograph I'm going off of. Now, as far as reference, I do have some photographs that I did collect, like I do a Google search for clouds or mountains or whatever, and I just kind of generally look at, what does a cloud do? What does a cloud look like? How would you shade a cloud? But I don't have a photograph sitting here that I'm just drawing from. I'm just taking different elements and different ways of shading and thinking through how you would draw something, and then just kind of playing around with it. So as I said before, sometimes those random marks, you can, they just come out of nowhere, and it produces something that you would have never done before. And so that's kind of what's going on here. Is I moved my blending stump in a certain way, and it created a little ledge here for these clouds, and I'm going to go with that. I'm going to work on that and kind of draw it out a bit more. So and the other thing you have to take into consideration is how contrast works. And so on the front of this mountain, this light source is coming and hitting this mountain really strong. So you have to be careful. If the background is too light, it really flattens out, because then it blends with the background. You want it to really pop. And so on this front edge, I'll probably, and I'll just go ahead and start doing it. I'll probably put in a little bit of darker tone so it really stands out. But the difficulty of this is that this whole area is lit strongly by the sun. So you don't want it to be too dark, but for the sake of the composition, you may just add a few dark spots just to let that mountain really stand out. So, all right. Well, I hope everyone is having a great day, and thank you for joining along as I'm doing a little bit of drawing here. Excited to be a part of the Visual Arts Academy. I have a lot of really cool things going on here, especially this month. We have an open studio where we're doing some figure drawing. That'll be later tonight. And then we have our exploration classes as always. And then in January, we start up with a whole another 8-week sessions, which I'm really looking forward to. Meeting some new students. So yeah, so right now, as I said before, I'm just really trying to establish that contrast between this mountain face and the clouds behind it. But the other advantage of working this light is that it's easy to lift off the paper. So if I get into an area and I feel like I've made it too dark, or I just don't like the texture of it, it's easy to lighten it up a bit. It's different in the other areas off to the right where it's like super dark. It's pretty much once you get that dark, you're committed to it. So you gotta be real intentional and careful and plan it out when you get into the real dark tones. That's for sure. This is a little area that's a little tricky because I have a midtone right below this highlight, and it's starting to get lost with the sky behind it. So that means I either make the sky darker or I make that midtone a little bit lighter, but I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. So that's one of those things where, if you don't draw a whole lot, you'll see artists come in and make a mark and then step back and then make another mark and maybe go over to another spot, make another mark, and you're like, what are they doing? Like, how do they know where to make the marks? And that's what's going on. You're looking at all the values of the entire piece, and certain things will just stand out to your eye, and you'll know, oh, this, I want this little area. It's like you'll see someone make that like the smallest little mark. Like, how do they know to make that mark right there? And part of it is just that whole process of standing back, reevaluating, measuring things against one another, including your tones. It's not just measuring proportion and perspective and things like that. It's also about measuring your tones against one another. So I think I'm going to pull this cloud over a bit and maybe blend it with the other side just to give some variation. Because right now on this side I have 3 clouds and it's looking a little too uniform. So I'm going to pull this over just a bit. And the other thing about clouds, or about the sky, when the clouds are way in the distance, sometimes they form kind of these bands of light of different tones. So I'm probably gonna utilize that here in this area just to really emphasize the atmosphere, the depth of the atmosphere. The sky going way, way, way back, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of miles down in the distance. It's really what I wanted to have that feel. Contrasted with these huge clouds. And I appreciate you guys joining along, watching as I'm working on this drawing. This is what I would call an apocalyptic landscape. This is the biggest landscape I've ever attempted, and I'm using both graphite and charcoal. Right now I'm using graphite. I've got my 4H pencil and just lightly putting in some bands of atmosphere back in here. This is the lightest part of the whole drawing. This is where the strongest light source is. The sun will be way up in the corner off the page, but it's shining down through these mountains, and there's going to be some kind of lighter, like light beams, I guess, highlighting down. There's going to be some figures down in the bottom. And I'm going to use some of those atmospheric effects to highlight the composition and the story of this picture. So right now I'm just trying to put in some subtle, very, very subtle tones, because I do want to indicate that the sky itself has a tone, even when the sun is shining really brightly. Usually when the sun is shining really brightly, you get some of the deepest, darkest blues in the sky. I don't want it to be too dark because I do really want to indicate a very strong light up in the left-hand corner. So some of this will be darker down here, and then I'll just get really, really, really light when I go up, approach that upper left-hand corner. So, the other thing I'm trying to be careful about is that the light is catching on this kind of ridge back here too, so I don't want to lose that. And if they're the same tone, then I'm going to lose that ridge, which means I either have to go back in and darken up the ridge, or, I mean, one thing I could do is just make the ridge in a certain spots kind of disappear, and that'll be kind of an atmospheric effect, I guess you could say. It's almost like the light is so strong that it's blinding the eye to see the details. I mean, that is kind of the point of atmospheric perspective, is you're making things further away. You're kind of not erasing, but you're excluding some details, or really just blending those details out to give it a sense of distance, being way far away. Now, some of these, I need to go back in and really work this area because I'm seeing a lot of marks, a lot of the strokes from this blending stuff that I don't want. So I need to kind of go the opposite way to get rid of some of those. And if it gets really bad, I can use my putty eraser to get rid of some of that. Just going in, indicating a bit of the sky here. This is the flat background that the clouds are sitting on. So nice light blue sky is what I'm envisioning in my mind, at least. Excuse me. So yeah, I appreciate you guys joining along and watching as I'm drawing. This is the first time I've ever done a live drawing like this, so it's very interesting because I usually, when I'm drawing by myself, I'm not really talking. I'm just usually listening to music or just being quiet. For whatever reason, all this talking has got my throat a little gunked up, so I apologize about all the clearing my throat so much. So, all right, it's looking all right. So yeah, on some of these areas, I go back in and just kind of lighten up some of the marking, but it's not all the way done. So let's see, let's go back up here. So yeah, so this is the upper part of that big, big cloud. We're going to start adding in some dark tones here. So some of these I'm gonna put some highlights on for it to be catching the light here. So I'll go back in with my kneaded eraser and pull some of that out. But for right now, I want to give, and when I say these aren't like super dark tones, like I said, I'm using that 4H, so you can't get like very dark with that. But dark for this area is what I would say. So So the other thing you think about with clouds too is that when you're looking up at the sky, you're not seeing like flat clouds. Obviously, you're seeing layers of clouds, especially at this angle. You're looking across the sky. So I'm also thinking about how am I going to indicate various layers of clouds. So some are going to be like this one here is going to be in the front. So it's going to have a little more definition. And so as I work these shadows and this blending, I'm really going to start putting in some kind of a little bit of indicate some rounded areas. But as I said before, like a cloud, all clouds have areas, some areas where the rounding or the you want to say the bulges or the puffy areas, I don't even know how to say it, are very defined. And then other areas where the clouds are just kind of wispy, even sometimes in the same cloud. But in this one, I'm going to indicate quite a bit of those up front. And then as they go back, they become less and less defined. So my goal today is to work on this area. I'm not going to be able to finish all this today. I'll probably be on here maybe another 20, 30 minutes. So I'll work on this area for a little bit, and then I'll jump over to the right side. And on the right side is where it's really getting dark. Got some dark clouds that are coming in. There's this huge valley scene. And as I said at the beginning, this is what I would call an apocalyptic landscape. So I'm very influenced and inspired by the work of John Martin, who was I think 19th century, 1800s artist. And I saw one of his paintings, I want to say it was at the Art Museum in Cincinnati. But I was walking through and I got to this room and it was 18th century paintings, and it was all like portraits and still lifes and some landscapes and things like that. And, you know, it had a very similar, all the paintings had a very similar look. And then in the corner, there was this painting by John Martin called Sadak, I think is how you say his name, Sadak's Search or Journey, I forget exactly what the title is. Sadak's Journey for the Waters of Oblivion, I think is what it was called. And I ended up, when I got to the gift shop, I found a poster of this painting because it was like incredible. And it was so different than the other paintings. Like I said before, all the other paintings were like still lifes and portraits. They had a very similar style to them. But this painting that he did looked like something out of a modern fantasy or like a sci-fi novel. Like it had this incredible look to it. And the landscape in the back was this vast mountainscape. And then there's this little figure towards the bottom climbing over this cliff, surrounded by pools of water. And it was just so remarkable and so beautiful. So I looked into some of his other works, and he did or painted a lot of works like that, like apocalyptic, end of the world type one, like one he has, and I really would love to see it in person. But it's basically that the day of God's wrath, I think, is one of, and it's a picture of the end of the world. And so this drawing is very much inspired by that. And it's not a copy of that work at all, but there are elements of that work that's informing what I'm doing as I'm drawing in here. So this area up here is, as I said before, this really light area with the sun. And then off to the right is just havoc. There's real dark clouds, hail, mountain exploding, all kinds of chaos. And then down towards the bottom in the middle is just these tiny figures kind of like surrounded by all this chaos. So very similar to John Martin's work, but not, a little bit of a different take on it. So yeah, so this area, I'll go in, work really, really with a lot of light tones. But then when I get to the right, it's like dark charcoal, lots of streaking, lots of smudging. Still defined, like you'll be able to see what everything is, but a lot more atmosphere, darker atmosphere, I should say. I mean, there's a lot of atmosphere here, but over there will be a lot of real dark, subtle light sources. this will be the strongest light source here, and then as you move over, you'll have a lot of secondary light sources. So some lightning, you'll see some, you know, explosions and fire and things like that. So nice, joyful drawing, I guess you could say. But makes for interesting artwork, I think. And I think it's one of those artworks that people can really identify with. You know, just this idea of the world being filled with chaos, and you feel so small and tiny and it's insignificant in the midst of it. Yeah. All right, we're coming along with these clouds here. Just trying to work up some mass and volume to these closer. These clouds here, a little bit closer up, kind of looming over these mountains, kind of reaching forward to the viewer is what I'm trying to get at. It's almost like when you see a storm coming, you're standing at your house or in your driveway or out in the field, and you just see this massive clouds coming your way. That's kind of what I want to convey, just a sense of heaviness and darkness, contrasted with this light and peaceful upper corner. So the work as a whole is definitely a lot of work in contrast, not just tone contrast, but also themes. So you have this dark and heavy contrast to the right, basically, well, not just to the right, though, about 3/4 of this whole thing. And then you've got this real light, subtle, almost like happy, joyful picture up in the left-hand corner. So yeah, now I'm just putting in some random darker variations of the clouds over here. Or as Bob Ross would say, happy little clouds. These are happier clouds than the other clouds I'm drawing. So yeah, so today I'll work on this, and then probably the next time I go live or the next time I work on this, I'm going to probably shift down, start using a bit more charcoal, and work on a different part of the piece just to keep it consistent. I know some artists, they'll just work the whole piece together, so they'll smudge charcoal over the whole surface and then start pulling out light tones. It's really abstract, and then over time it kind of forms itself. I'm more of, I work on a little area, get it up to a certain level that I want, then I'll move to a different area. Sometimes, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, I'll work an area until I feel like it's pretty much finished, and then move to the next area, work on that till it's finished. But I typically like to jump around in different areas just to make sure everything's coming out the same, or at least consistently. Oh, this is starting to come together here. Yeah, like I said before, I'll probably take my smudge or putty eraser and then go back in and lift some of these tones out. And what that does is really gives this really cool effect where the cloud almost becomes translucent. And if you look at a storm cloud, you'll see these little pockets of real dark areas right next to this real kind of ephemeral light pockets of abstract light, which is just beautiful. And so I'm going to try and capture some of that, especially over here as it's progressing to get darker. You know, and really dark or really heavy storm clouds are quite dark and flat. But the areas around, like when you first see those storm clouds coming over the horizon, there's such a variation of tone in the midst of them. Because the other thing too is in those dark storm clouds, you have lightning that's shining out. So it's almost like a secondary light source from within it. So that creates a lot of beautiful effects within the cloud. I'm going to try and capture some of that here as well. So I usually work back and forth because in this area here, I want it to be a bit darker, and I'm trying to make a balance between the really dark area to the right of the mountains and then the super light area up in the upper left. So this area in here is going to have a bit of both of that. It's going to have the real dark area, maybe just little specks of deep dark, and then it's going to have a lot of like really translucent and light areas as well. The other thing that I'm trying to be very careful of or cognizant of is the variation. One of the temptations is to pull or put in darks and pull out lights in a regular, it almost looks like a pattern, which creates a flatness, and you want a lot of variation. So like you'll just kind of pull out something and then an inch over, pull out some more, and an inch over, pull out some more, and then you look at it and it looks like a pattern. You don't want it to be pattern. You want it to be a lot of variety, very abstract. There's no rhyme or reason to it, just a lot of variation. And so you have to be careful about that too. But that's, once again, one of those things where you watch an artist, they go in, they work on a little tiny speck of an area, step back and wonder what they're doing. It's that kind of thing, just trying to balance out where everything's going. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about in this area, because I've got this pocket of dark, but I've got a pocket here, and a pocket here, a pocket here, and a pocket here. I just want to make sure that they're not all exactly the same. Let's blend some of that. Well, I appreciate you all joining, watching along. Feel free to drop any questions or comments whenever you want. And if I don't see them while I'm drawing, I'll definitely get to them later. Or if you're catching the live stream after the actual live stream, still feel free to put in some questions and I'll go back and take a look at them. I am working on this from the Visual Arts Academy in Louisville, Kentucky. I've got a little studio upstairs, and this is a personal project that I'm working on, trying to stay up on my own skills as I instruct and encourage other artists that come to our academy to learn. Seth and I always talk about how important it is as an instructor to also be pushing yourself and working hard at learning new skills and trying new things. So this is definitely a new thing for me. This is one of the biggest landscapes I've ever attempted. So, and on top of that, being a landscape that I'm not using a whole lot of reference for. I'm just basically, I have some reference as I talked about before, but a lot of this is just kind of coming out of my head. So that is a challenge because you want to make sure it looks right, looks real, even though it's not technically real in the sense it's not. You couldn't go to this location, I guess you could say. So right now I'm just trying to soften up some of these areas. I did notice that some areas are really soft and nice, and then other areas you're seeing a lot of pencil marks, so I'm just trying to get rid of some of those pencil marks. So I don't want you to be distracted by the drawing materials. I want you to instead look at it and think, oh, that's a cloud. That, there's subtle and soft transitions there that look exactly what a cloud would look like. So that's also why it's important what kind of pencils you use, what kind of materials you use. Some of the darker areas, the disadvantage of graphite is that it leaves a shine, especially if you're doing large areas of graphite. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast with graphite. So graphite's beautiful, but that shine can be pretty distracting, especially depending on the light. So I tried using these matte pencils, and they're designed to eliminate a lot of that shine. I need to do some more research on what those pencils are made of, because it feels like it's almost like they've compressed some charcoal in with the graphite. Because the advantage of them is they go on dark in a way that a softer graphite pencil would go, without a lot of the shine. It eliminates a lot of the shine, not all the shine, but it eliminates a lot of the shine. But it goes on; those pencils go on so grainy, and they're so difficult to blend, that for me, when I've used that in a particular area, all I see is the grain of the paper, and that just drives me insane. So what I decided, as I was drawing this, I was going to do the whole thing in graphite using those pencils, but I really want that flat matte look that you only get from charcoal. So I'm going to do a mix of graphite and charcoal, especially in the dark areas. Now in these lighter areas, I'm using graphite because charcoal can be very difficult to do in lighter areas with real subtle tones. So I'm using a 4H in this area, and then in the dark areas, I'm using vine charcoal and charcoal pencils and things like that. So the advantage of charcoal is that with the vine, especially with the charcoal pencils, or with the vine charcoal, you can get these large areas of tone, and then the charcoal pencils, you can go in and get a lot of detail. I mean, you can do it with the vine too if you get a nice sharp edge. But you can use the pencil to great effect. The only downside of them, and I just need more practice with charcoal probably, is it's difficult to get really, really light, subtle tones. You just put in a little bit of charcoal and then you're trying to move it around. It can get really messy, especially if you're trying to do light clouds like I'm doing here. But the solution for me for right now is to use graphite in these areas. So I'm using a little 4H pencil and this blending stump to get these nice nice subtle transitions. So I'm liking where these clouds are going. I'm going to continue working over into this area. And I'll probably come back in. There's some areas like up in here, which I'll just go ahead and do it. I'm gonna define some of the cloud because I want there to be kind of that, you could say, that bubble effect. But I'm also gonna come back in with my highlighter, my eraser, my putty eraser, and lift out some highlights, because that sun is coming right across here, and so it's gonna catch some of that. But below that or underneath that, there's gonna be some darker tones too, because it's gonna create those nice deep shadows in the midst of these big clouds here. So appreciate you guys jumping on, checking us out. Thank you so much. This is the first time I have done anything like this as far as live drawing. And when I first started, it was kind of terrifying, but now that I've kind of got into it, I'm kind of used to it now. So I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. So I will try to be on here on a regular basis. I think both me and Seth are going to be doing these live sessions quite often. Especially for people that don't live here in town and still want to be a part of what we have going on at the Visual Arts Academy. These live events really help with that. So live events are really nice. They don't ever replace the classroom, the experience that you get with a live instructor and being there and working together and feeding off each other, bouncing ideas off one another. But at the same time, the live is nice because you can see and watch another artist process as they create. So yeah, right now I'm just working on this cloud area. This is the main part that I'm gonna focus on today, and then in the coming days when I get back on, I'm going to shift down to the right and then really get into some of the darker atmospheric parts. Yeah, I'm just trying to create some volume. This cloud right here up front, kind of extending or reaching over this line of mountains. And then as it moves left, it's going to kind of fade into the brightness of the sun. I'm trying to balance that with putting in some deeper shadows here. As I was saying before, that's the beauty of a cloud. It's got so much variation within the same cloud, especially these bigger storm clouds. You get these deep, dark shadows right in the middle of kind of where the sun is poking through. Gives some nice contrast. So yeah, I'll probably be on here for maybe 15 more minutes. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share. I'd love to interact with you all. Let's come along here. Now I've got some kind of random marks here I just really want to make soften up, so I'm going to blend those out. And then I'm starting to think about how the upper corner is going to be, because I do want to put some clouds in there, but I don't want it to be too defined. I want it to be quite abstract and light. So I'll probably just use my blending stump to start indicating some clouds, and then start shading in from there. So it's going to go in and just kind of random marks here. Don't really have a plan for this area. I mean, I have an overarching plan. I kind of know what I want it to look like, but I don't know specifically where I'm going to be putting these clouds. Let's see here. All right, now I'm starting to work in a second layer of clouds. And this layer is going to be somewhat lighter than the layer in front. Well, that was a little plan on that mark, but it actually worked out. So as I keep looking at it, I kind of bend back a little bit because I want to see it from far away, and I'll probably get up here towards the end and just kind of, what I'll do is I'll step back, look at it, evaluate, come up with a plan for the next time that I work in this area. What do I need to adjust? What do I need to work on? One of the things I do notice is I have a tendency to mark this way. So a lot of the pencil marks and smudge marks are in one direction. So I'm going back the other way just to kind of balance them out a little bit. And trying to think through how to make this. This will probably be kind of the middle layer of clouds. So I got this one that's up close. I need to darken in a bit more, define it a bit more. Then I've got a middle one. And then in the background, I think I'm going to do just some light clouds in there. And then I'll step back, I'll get back in it, and then I'll make some more adjustments to really accentuate the different layers of clouds. Yeah, it's coming along. So I may jump in and use, I've got a HB pencil. I'm gonna put in some additional tone. Just to help give it some added depth and variation. The other thing to notice too is I'm not just putting in like a whole area of it. I'm just kind of put in a little here, a little there, and then I'll come back in with my blending stump and move some of that graphite around to give it added variation. Just like that. There you go. It's looking good. I like that. Yeah, I got that kind of some dark shadow there, and then it's really making the highlights pop, which I really like that. I'm going to add a little bit more using my HB pencil on this. These are kind of the deepest pockets of cloud. And then I'm also using the shadow or the dark tone to really pop the highlights, because the sunlight is coming across these clouds, so it's going to catch some of the rims of these clouds. As well, the sun is hitting from behind the cloud too, so there's going to be some internal light. There we go. All right, we'll blend some of that stuff here. There we go. That's good. All right. Appreciate everyone joining. I'll be on here probably about five or six more minutes. We'll call it a day. And I'll be on again. Might do a little bit tomorrow. We'll see. Seth is probably going to get on here tomorrow too, so do some more live sessions. So I hope they're helpful and inspiring to you all. Really help push you to do some of your own drawing and creating. Right. So yeah, just as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, yeah, this area up here in the front, I'm gonna need to add some more bands of dark just coming across here a little bit, and then probably definitely some more definition on this front edge versus the clouds behind it. Some of that's gonna be like really subtle, so you just gotta be really careful with it. And that's the advantage of working in layers. You know, you put in a layer, you put in a little bit of tone, you come back, you add a little bit, and those clouds slowly pop out from one another. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone that got on and put some comments and interaction. I really love that. I am going to probably end this session here. We've got our live model drawing tonight, and we've got a still life set up for people to come in and draw. So I need to kind of get set up for that. But I appreciate everyone joining. I hope this was helpful and inspiring to you. And we'd love for you to come down to the Visual Arts Academy, come visit us, come check out our studio, our classes, come check out our artwork that we've got going on, and we'd love to see you. We love teaching. We love inspiring and encouraging other people to create. So really appreciate it. We'll be on again soon, and I look forward to interacting with all of you. See you guys.